Hi, this is Yara Stark, and welcome to the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. Today's interview guest is possibly the most influential internet marketer I've ever personally had a connection with, and certainly the internet marketer who very, very early on in my career had an influence over me. His name is Perry Marshall, and you probably already know him from his Google AdWords guide, the definitive guide to Google AdWords, but he's actually a very well-established direct marketer and is certainly one of the, original people I know of. Like I said, he was the most influential early on in my career, and if you ever got into anything to do with pay-per-click marketing, you touched on Perry's work. It's definitely considered some of the fundamental training in that area. So in this interview, Perry's going to talk about all kinds of aspects of his business and what he does. So there's great stuff to learn, and of course learn a bit more about Perry and his background. So I hope you enjoy the call. If you have not listened to my podcast before, please make sure you head to my blog where you can find the archive of my previous shows. And I have plenty of free podcasts with interviews with experts in the internet marketing, entrepreneurship, and business industries. To find those, just go to entrepreneurs-journey.com or go to Google and search my name, which is Yaro, Y-A-R-O, and you will find my blog as the top result there. If you just click the podcast link when you get to my blog, you'll find an archive of all my free podcasts available 24 hours a day, and there's lots of great value there for you to dive into. I hope you enjoyed this call with Perry. That's it for me. Bye-bye. Hi, this is Yaro Stark here, and I have a very special guest with me on the line. And why it's very special, and we'll have to talk about this in a moment, but my guest was actually the person who produced the very first affiliate product I ever promoted on my blog. There's a story behind that, but let's dive into this first. So my guest is Perry Marshall. Thank you for joining me, Perry.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So yeah, Perry, you probably don't realize this, but back when my blog was in its first 6 months, its infancy of life, I had reached a point where I had about 500 visitors a day, and I'd seen a lot of other people making money from blogging, and I'd made money from websites prior to that, and I knew how awesome affiliate marketing could be, and I was very much exposed to your work around that time with the definitive guide to Google AdWords and what you were teaching with your AdWords e-course. So that was the the first offer I did was your combined Renaissance Club offer, and I wrote a little review when you were giving away those CDs with Ken McCarthy and so forth, and I wrote a little review expecting 500 readers, maybe a 10% conversion rate. I might sell, or maybe even 25 to 50 copies, and went to bed after posting this little blog post, and I woke up to no sales, and I was a little bit bummed about that. It was a lesson. Nothing, of course, wrong with your product. I did go on to sell some copies of it, but the lesson there was blogging wasn't quite as an immediate response tool as email and other methods, but over the course of the next few months, the sales kept coming in, and in fact, later that year, I think you ran one of your events, one of the rare events that you've actually controlled, and I had a couple of $700 affiliate sales, and that really blew me away. So you have definitely been instrumental in my path as a blogger making money, but obviously that's not the reason why you're here on the call, Perry. I'd like to get to know a little bit more about you and your background. So, you've got quite a well-known story for, as you call it, being a cubicle slave. So, can you explain what you used to be and where you are now?
Well, I started out getting an engineering education, and the reason I did that was because I was an audio geek. And I knew how to build stereo equipment, but I only knew it as a craft. I didn't really know it from the bottom up. And so I actually went to engineering school because I wanted to figure all that out. And I got out and I designed speakers for a couple years, and then I was a rep for a while, and went into sales and marketing, and so there was quite a long period of time where I was just slogging it out, making cold calls and all this kind of stuff. And I'm a pretty determined guy, and sometimes you can bring all the determination in the world to something and just end up exasperated. I think I probably came close to giving myself a nervous breakdown or something. And I got fired from a job, and then I switched jobs. And in the meanwhile, kind of while all this turmoil was going on, I discovered direct marketing. And I wondered, well, how well could this really work if I could find the right situation? Maybe I could generate sales leads and use my writing skills and stuff, and I wouldn't have to live like this anymore. And I switched jobs, and it was kind of similar to the earlier job that I had, except they were using the internet to collect sales leads, and it was working. And it was like this night and day transition, and I went from chasing people around all the time to basically being a consultative sales guy. In hindsight, it's sort of like I sort of accidentally discovered how Generation X and Generation Y wants to be marketed to, which is not how baby boomers wanted to do things. Which is a lot less pressure. The customer has a lot more control of the situation. It's a lot more information-driven, a lot more value-driven, a lot less hard sell. And so it started to work, and it was like coming to work every day and having an email box with sales leads that I could email the people back and start talking to them and talk to them on the phone. And I'd talk to people on the phone, and they'd go, "So do you ever get to Cleveland, Ohio? Is there any way you could stop by and talk to us about this?" Like, nobody ever did that before. and so like that really worked out well, and the company grew, and it was a successful sales career. And then I really dug into the marketing side of it. I saw a huge amount of power. It's like, okay, the more customers we put in the top of this funnel, the better this works. And so I got really good at generating sales leads and doing publicity and writing magazine articles and stuff. And then the company got sold in 2001, and I got some stock options, which gave me some cash for a while. And my wife said, "Well, Perry, you've always wanted to do your own thing. This is your chance. This is it." And she convinced me, so I went out on my own. And I just started really doing as a freelancer what I had already been doing in the Dilbert Cube. So it wasn't that rough of a transition. It was fairly smooth, really.
Perry, I find it interesting that you were one of the first people I came across who had such a tightly defined positioning in the internet marketing world, and were clearly dominating a niche like no one else was, and that's with pay-per-click marketing, particularly through Google AdWords. Now,
right.
I'm curious because for me there's a bit of a gap in awareness of you were consulting, I guess, doing what you have been doing with direct marketing for a company as an employee. Then you turned into a consultant, but then you started turning more to be an information publisher, at least from the sense of using that to generate leads, and then you started doing, I guess, group coaching and things like that. You have I'm sure, a very extensive sales funnel of multiple products, but can you tell us how, I guess, the idea to position yourself as a pay-per-click expert came about, and how you managed to do that?
Well, I knew how to position myself as an expert by being an information source from my prior life at the former company. We sold industrial networks, and I started publishing magazine articles and white papers and all kinds of stuff like that, like a banshee, until there was so much stuff written by me. Like, I was probably, in that whole industry, I was probably the second most quoted person. There was this one other guy who was a consultant who was probably quoted more than me, but that was pretty good for a guy who's like, part outside sales, part inside sales, part marketing manager. But so I knew how to do that. And it's like, okay, take all this technical, complicated information, break it down into simple, bite-sized pieces, and make it interesting, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the formula. Well, so I start using pay-per-click, and I thought Google AdWords was just absolutely fabulous. I mean, I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, and I figured it out, and for a year it was like my secret. Like, I didn't want to tell anybody about it because it was so cool, and nobody understood it. Everybody's over using Yahoo, Overture, and it's like, man, this is where the real game is. But the faster everybody finds out, that would be bad. But then Ken McCarthy knew that I was doing this, and we had some conversations. And at one point, he goes, "Perry, I need somebody to speak at my seminar. Who should I get?" And I said, "You should get Andrew Goodman." Because he had like the first pay-per-click book, and it was a good one too. And so he goes and talks to Andrew, and Andrew turned him down, and Ken comes back to me and he goes, "Well, Perry, I think you should speak at my seminar." Well, I immediately knew what that meant. That meant that, okay, I got to have a book, I got to have CDs, I got to have something to sell at a seminar. If I'm going to go to the trouble of doing all that, then I also need to sell it online, and I need to jump into the fray. And there's like a new AdWords ebook coming out every other day, like literally. Like that's not an exaggeration. That's what it was like back then. And like, so I've got to have a better sales funnel than all those other guys. And I already had a pretty extensive marketing background. I was in Dan Kennedy's VIP group. I'd been reading his newsletters for about 6 years at the time, probably. I'd been involved in a lot of things. I had a lot of street experience. And the thing was, now I didn't exactly, like at the very beginning, I didn't really exactly set up to be like, position myself as the world's pay-per-click expert. However, what I did understand that I had to do, I thought this was going to last for 6 months, and then the internet would go into some next new fad, or all the free ebooks would drown out everybody who's trying to sell one, or I had no idea that it was going to get as big as it did, or have the longevity that it's had. So here's all I knew. All I knew was I got to have a higher visitor value than everybody else. And if you want to put it another way, affiliates have to make more money sending traffic to my book than anybody else's book. That's the name of the game. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to have all the copywriters that I can find rip my sales letter to shreds and tell me how to fix it. And I got to have more testimonials than anybody else. And I got to, instead of just trying to sell a book, I'm gonna get opt-ins, and I'm going to build a big list. And I'm going to nurture. And I think this is the most important part. I am going to nurture that list by feeding them and feeding them and feeding them with really good stuff. I'm not just going to burn them out with a bunch of promos. And you know what? That ended up being a winning strategy. And so that makes me known as the Google AdWords guy, but what I really am is of all the AdWords guys, I was the guy that knew how to build the best sales funnel. And that's how I became, known as the Google AdWords guy, which, that's a pretty good hat to wear in the world, turns out. And I'm blessed. I'm very thankful for having had the opportunity to do that. And then I think it comes with a responsibility, which is, there's all kinds of people that, whether they woke up yesterday and they decided they want to go to a business, or whether they have an ongoing business and they got to figure out how to get customers on the internet, if I tell them that I can teach them how to use Google AdWords, then I better do that to the best of my ability. And I want my customers to be successful because, the world's a pretty brutal place out there. And there's a lot of people that they do a lot of disappointing things and things that don't work. And, I remember what that was like. I remember drinking pink Kool-Aid and believing the snake oil salesman and doing all kinds of stupid stuff that never really worked. And I remember all of the weird psychological tactics they would use to make me think it was my fault that their system didn't work. And which is really, good grief, that could be a whole 2-hour conversation.
Right. So really, there was a bit of wanting to buck the trend and stand out through quality.
Yeah.
And stand out through, obviously, a funnel where your affiliates get paid well and they have a really high converting product, so they're more inclined to promote your book. So I think affiliates have a lot to give credit in terms of spreading your book far and wide.
Well, absolutely. And affiliates had more to do with it than anything, especially at first. Now, in my opinion, there's two parts of the equation. The one part of the equation is the ability to convert a visitor to a customer. It's the basic visitor value equation. The other one, though, is the quality reputation. Ultimately, if the definitive guide to Google AdWords had not been a really good, really thorough book that people could understand and use and that they enjoyed reading and enjoyed applying, if it had not been that, eventually somebody else would have taken over. In the long run, the product really has to be quality because, look, on the internet, if somebody buys a product and it's crap, it ain't that hard to go tell everybody.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's like a great feedback mechanism.
You cannot hide really bad quality. You can hide some bad quality, or you can hide the fact that, some customers this really isn't a match for, but, if it's a crappy product, the world's going to know. So, there really needs to be substance. And I think, a lot of people talk about information marketing, like having an info business is the ideal business. It's the perfect business because it's got, zero delivery cost of the product. It could be electronic and high profit margins and all this kind of stuff, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's all sort of true and everything, but I really don't believe you should be an info marketer unless you have something worthwhile to say. I think there's a responsibility there.
Which leads me to a next question, but before I do that, I've just got a little personal curiosity. You don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but how many copies of the Definitive Guide do you think you've sold now over the several years that it's been available?
Tens of thousands.
Okay.
I don't know the exact number, and I would probably be reluctant to tell you what it is anyway, but yeah, tens of thousands, and a lot of people think that, well, that's the dream business. You just sell tens of thousands of copies of some ebook, but you gotta just recognize a couple things, which is there's a pretty high customer acquisition cost for that book. We pay affiliates half that money. And if we have to buy those customers through Google traffic or some other source, it costs a similar amount of money. And the real business is in what happens after that. Like the Renaissance Club membership or the coaching programs or things like that. And I think if you're going to do an info business, there needs to be a ladder. Everybody who goes to college knows they start out as a freshman, and eventually they become a senior, and then there's graduate school. There's a master's degree, and there's a PhD. And they all know that ladder is there, okay? And I'm sure a lot of universities, if you took away their graduate programs and all they had was bachelor's degrees, there would be an awful lot of money and an awful lot of benefit that would never get realized from that university, because those higher levels are really important. Mm. Even if they're not the largest numbers of students. There's all these other factors like research grants and prestige and the ability to attract good faculty. If you're a college professor, you probably want to go teach at a school that has a graduate program, not one that doesn't. So there's a lot that goes into it, and so there should be a path.
Yeah, the back end at university. I hadn't considered that. That's interesting.
Universities have back end.
Yeah. One of the things, Perry, again, that sort of defined you, and I'm sure this has been a very conscious choice because you just mentioned the fact about you don't want to beat your list with promotion after promotion, but you must be and must consistently be bombarded by joint venture opportunities and affiliates people trying to get you to be their affiliate, especially because you exist in the internet marketing world and you have massive exposure and everyone knows how big your list would be, et cetera, et cetera. But you stayed pretty true to your core value proposition there, where you're delivering content. Obviously, the thing you promote the most is your own internal products, and you've sort of shunned away. I think that I was a bit obviously it's not a bad thing, but you actually promoted Pay-Per-Click Classroom last year, and I was like, wow, I think that's the first time I've ever seen Perry or received an email where he promoted an external product that wasn't like a pure joint venture where you might have been partnering with them somehow. So
but there's a story behind that.
Okay, well,
which I can tell you.
Go ahead.
But let me address the first part of your question. Sure. Is yes, I have everybody relentlessly pursuing me. Even the best, highest profile people in the whole business. They all want me to promote stuff to my list. And I am very selective. I'm very choosy. And some of it is like if there's something about it that I just don't like, I won't do it. It could be that simple. I think actually the willingness to walk away from money is one of the most important things about making money. Quality means not being a whore. And it's true in the world of sex, and it is true in the world of business too. And it doesn't mean that just because I don't promote something mean it's bad by any means. But no, but here's a perfect example and I've actually never told this story before, so this is a good one. Pay-Per-Click Classroom. I knew Amit Mehta because he was in my roundtable for a little while. He came to one of my 4-man intensives. I was very impressed with him. Very sharp guy. He clearly knew a lot more about affiliate marketing than I did. He'd learned from my Google stuff and then turbo applied it multiple ways. He had this fabulous track record. And so then I run into him a few months ago, and he says, "Hey, I got this thing I'm promoting, and it's called Pay-Per-Click Classroom, and I'd love to have you promote it." And I'm like, "Well, I like Amit. I like what he knows. He's very knowledgeable. I like his approach, so sure. Except I didn't have time to evaluate his product. I just didn't. I could only go off the fact that I knew him and his approach. And also, I really don't like the big, huge launches.
I noticed that.
I just don't like them. Nothing against people that do them, but It's just, I don't know. I can't even totally explain why. It's just so. So it turned. I didn't really realize at the time. Oh, this is going to be a big giant launch, and I also didn't know that before it was all said and done, he was going to have recruited like everybody. You know, so I'm just one guy among many, many, which I do not. That's one of the things I don't like about it, is if I'm promoting the same thing as everybody else, then what value am I adding to somebody's email box? So what I did was I posted a video where I talked about a variety of things, including Amit, and then it was not obvious until after you were already through the video that I was talking about Amit's product. So only those people would even know that I was promoting his thing. And again, I'm cautious because I haven't really seen his product. I'm taking a risk, and that is risky. And I only promoted this to a certain part of my list anyway. And so just really a fairly small number of really interested people end up going to Amit's site, okay? And it sold well, and you know, the affiliate commissions were good and everything, but then, you know, with all these customers coming in, they had some customer service problems, and I got a few complaints, and for a little while, I was really nervous that I had made a mistake. You know, like, well, I'm glad I didn't promote this to everybody. But they straightened them out, and they squared it away, and everything's fine. You know, so that's cool. But you know, what I have found, and I think this is true across the board, if you have a real relationship with your list, like they really know you, and they can sense the personality, and they understand what you're about, what you're for, and what you're not for, then what you sell that is your own will generally way outsell, you know, anybody else's promotion or anybody else's style, because there's a style transition there, kind of a culture transition from, you know, this guy's culture and this guy's style to somebody else's, and you know, some are a better match than others, and that's kind of part of it. And so I tend to come up with my own things, and I think that's served me well, and it also forces me to be really resourceful in terms of taking my customers to bigger and better places that they've never been before, as opposed to just doing what everybody else is doing. So just within the last month, we launched a jet propulsion program, and that was from our point of view, it's very ambitious because we have a whole team managing people's pay-per-click campaigns. It's very labor-intensive, very service-oriented. But, you know, people have been asking for this for a very long time. And it was time for us to do it. And I finally had the right people. And the interesting thing about those people was they were all grown inside of Planet Perry. Jeff Hughes was in my very first roundtable group, and he was in my very first bobsled run, and he kicked ass, and he went on to build this team of pay-per-click experts inside his company. Okay, and then there's Glenn Livingston, who's been having a coaching call with me for the last 5 years, and Glenn and Jeff were both in my first roundtable group, and they met there, and they built this relationship, and they ended up growing a company. And you know who else was in my first roundtable group was Ari Galper.
Yeah, you mentioned him.
Okay, and now look at what's happening over a long period of time. Over a long period of time is I'm growing a group of people and a culture and a whole microcosm, an entire community. Okay, now just slamming people with affiliate promotions does not grow a community. it actually tends to tear it apart. There's a cost to that. And so, Joe Polish, he's a guy that I learned a lot from early on. He talks about people strip mining their list, where, sell them whatever you can get them to buy. Well, if there's a lot of buyer's remorse in that list, you killed it. So you have to be very, very careful of what you recommend. And I had a lot of people, they'd send me emails that are like, I never would have bought Amit's thing. Then I saw you were promoting, and I'm like, well, I guess this must be real. And yeah, I bought it, and it's good. So
it's interesting.
Long answer to a short question.
You're good at that, Perry. It's the reason that I ask is obviously you've been a bit of a benchmark in terms of my own mailing and keeping content high. But I've faced the difficulty of wanting to create relationships with certain well-known people, and one of the best ways to obviously do that is to sell copious amounts of their product. So,
yes, without a doubt.
Yes. So what I found interesting, I think this is probably harks back to what you said initially about how important it was to set up a defined funnel to really reward affiliates well and get the high conversion and the high visitor value there, because you've been able to maintain and I guess have affiliate relationships grow over time without necessarily needing to get any one big affiliate on board. You're not doing big launches, so there's no time pressure there to get them all on board at a certain period of time. And because I guess you focus on getting more from an individual customer, there's no need to have a heavy reliance on, I guess, super affiliates. You can do just as well with an army of adequate affiliates. And therefore, you don't feel the obligation to, maintain these relationships by, I promote you, you promote me, sort of pat on our back kind of thing.
Right.
Because, would that be correct?
Yes, I've very much resisted putting myself in a position where I'm obligated to promote somebody's thing. Because the paramount asset that I have is my customer list. Nothing that compromises my customer list is allowed. Okay? So that's the basic premise. And so there's kind of a minimum standard of okay, once in a while we can send out an email that is just pitch and no content, but not very often. And most emails are, a little bit of pitch and a lot of content, and quite a few emails are all content and no pitch. Because it's that emotional bank account thing that Stephen Covey talks about in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where everybody has an emotional bank account, and you're either making deposits or you're making withdrawals, and as soon as you make more withdrawals than deposit, the relationship is bankrupt. And so when all this recession paranoia started, I just said, well, everybody's scared and everybody's nervous and everything's uncertain, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to crank up the quality and quantity of good content that I send to my list. I'm going to ratchet that up another notch or two. I am going to be the most trusted guy. And that seems to be working. My numbers, for the most part, are just fine. There's a few areas where I'm seeing that it's harder to sell, but for the most part, everything's staying even. Where I'm hearing a lot of people complain that their numbers are way down, and I think again in a very uncertain atmosphere, it's the most trusted guy that people end up doing business with. So that's kind of my feeling about that.
Agreed, yes. I've noticed my numbers are not really significantly down. If anything, they're up. So I think that's probably for anyone who's sort of teaching anything to do with for lack of a better term, business opportunities or ways to make money, then it's actually a good time for us. But okay, so I think there's pretty clear message there, quality. But there's something, and I guess I've found. Well, I'd love to get in and pick at what you do with your funnel. Now, you're obviously teaching something that's very much inspired by direct marketers that have gone in the past, and they're very big about controlling the conversion points along each section of the sales funnel and knowing those numbers. How important has it been, I think, to ramping up your business growth to really get tight control over everything you do at all points? From, I'm assuming the Definitive Guide is your biggest sort of front end lead generator still.
Yeah, that's the biggest front end. Yeah. And the 5-day, the Google 5-day course. I'll tell you how I am about numbers and stuff. Everything I do is shaped by the whole 80-20 thing, which great book called The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch, I would say is probably the most influential business book I've ever read. And what that book's all about is there's a small number of things that you need to watch very closely, and then there's a very large number of things that you don't really need to pay a lot of attention to at all. Now, there are certain key points in the sales funnel that we pay a lot of attention to, like the Google ads, the landing pages, the sales pages, and the upsells of the Definitive Guide. That's all, we've tweaked that and played with it and to the max, okay? Now, what I don't do, some people would, but I don't, is I don't have some big spreadsheet that says, okay, here's the conversion rate from day 41 of the autoresponder, and here's the conversion rate from day 56, and all. I couldn't tell you all that.
Good, that's reassuring.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, and honestly, there's this kind of mantra out there that you measure and track everything. If you get inside of real businesses and you actually try to do that, you will find that there's always a whole bunch of dots that you cannot connect. You can only make approximations. It turns out there was actually 5 different things that influenced that person to make a purchase, and you could only measure one of them at any one time. And the other 4 played a part. You just can't measure it, and you kind of have to be okay. It's like some sort of marketer's version of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Okay?
What have you found to be the number one thing, then, to make this really practical for the listeners?
Well, so you could have hundreds of pages on your website, but opt-in page, sales page, upsell, cross-sell, those are what you pay attention to. Okay?
Simple as that.
How many things is that? 4 or something?
Yeah.
Okay? Not very many. Now, the other thing that I do that most people do not do is I religiously segment my list, which is to say that every time I do something to my list, I measure what happens, and that goes into some group. Okay, so I use Infusion software, and they get all these. I can create a tag for any group that I want, and so I can create a group from people who clicked on a link, or I can create a group from people who signed up for a teleseminar, or people who bought a product, or any number of things. And so I make it a habit to do that. So these groups are constantly being created. And then, and so 2 things are going on. Is first of all, when people buy something or they do some major event, they sign up for something on the website, they get plugged into an autoresponder sequence, and the autoresponder just goes about and it does its job. And then the other thing is that, like when I send out email blasts, I only send them to people who would be interested in whatever I'm doing that day. Okay, so I write an email. I go, okay, this email is for business-to-business marketers. So which ones of these lists are business-to-business people? This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So I'm going to send it to those people, and not only that, I'm only going to send it to people whose contact record or information has somehow or another been updated in the last year. So if they've never been added to a new group or anything like that, it looks like they're not even paying attention, or their email is going to a black hole. After a while, they mostly stop getting emails from me, and it happens automatically. And so I'm always focusing on the people that are paying attention and who are interested, and I'm not bothering everybody else. And so some people literally hear from me once every 2 months, and other people hear from me once or twice a day. And they got there naturally. The amount of email they get from me is dependent on how interested they actually are. And so that's a really huge thing for having a high level of readership, is I'm not annoying people more than I should.
And it's interesting. Rich, you're friends with Rich Schefren as well, and I was listening to a call between him and the I don't know if it's the owner or the managing director of Infusionsoft, and they were commenting. Rich was noting how he's able to maintain sort of top status in a lot of affiliate competitions, and I guess he's a bit different from you in the sense that he does always try and promote his buddies, whatever, Frank Kern, Jeff Walker, Mike Filsaime, etc., whoever's doing a launch StomperNet, but he can maintain the integrity of his list by doing the exact same thing you're talking about. So he looks at whoever opened or clicked certain types of emails, he'll only send that type of promotion to them, and he can maintain the integrity he has with the list that way. And I've only just started doing that myself. I'm an AWeber user still, so we have less functionality along those lines, but yeah, I can see the value in it. But Perry, I think I've taken enough of your time, but I have one more question. Obviously, a lot of my readers and listeners are bloggers, and that's part of the area that I train in. And I've noticed lately that you are getting more prolific with your blogging, which is good to see. And obviously, you've been an email newsletter writer for a long time, and I'm sure you experienced this, that the newsletters sort of disappear sometimes into the archives, and you don't have an online repository or something like that. They're in your sequence. How have you found now, blogging, and how is it fitting into your business? Well,
I kind of like to joke about people who are blogging for 12 cents an hour. And there's a lot of that goes on. I really believe that the core of any online marketing business, at least if it's personality driven or driven by a sustained interest in a topic, the core is email. And that your number one job is to build an email list, and I think that's true regardless of what the doomsayers have to say about email, because email is not going away. Email is the center of civilization. I was at church yesterday, and this guy is talking to me, and he's like, "Could we have breakfast sometime this week?" And I said, "Send me an email." Now, why did I do that? Because I didn't have my calendar with me. I don't do the Crackberry thing. My calendar's on my computer. My computer is email, and that's how people make it into my calendar. Okay? Well, I think that happens a lot. Okay? Email is the center of civilization. So I will continue to be an email guy. Now, what blogging has done is it's given a place for people to respond without me being obligated to respond back to them. Okay? But I can still read what they said, and there can still be a conversation there. And that is really valuable, and I found myself quite fascinated by it. I always read the comments that people post on my blog. I don't respond to much of it. I don't usually need to, but it's really interesting to see where things go. Had a great thread this last week about toxic people and toxic customers, which it went in all kinds of interesting directions in the comments, not just like customer relationships, but even like male-female relationships and family relationships. And I mean, it like you start pushing the right buttons with people, and they just go and they don't stop, you know. Yes. And I think that's absolutely fascinating, and definitely, you know, if I can have people coming back to my website, checking the blog or getting those email updates from every time there's a blog comment or whatever, that just heightens the level of activity. And there's that, you know, basically you're catering to 1% of the people, but it's the 1% that are paying the most attention. And so, I mean, that's a way of building a rabid audience and a really responsive customer list. And so, you know, it's a great feedback tool, especially when you get into controversial or highly emotional topics. So, you know, I love that aspect of it. I just think it has its place. I think that social media and Web 2.0 is secondary to the core direct marketing basics. I do not think it's a replacement. I had a really, really interesting conversation with Ed Dale last week, who turns out he had just pulled the plug on a Facebook group with 5,000 members. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, everybody, but this just was not proving to be worth my time. And I'm like, not surprised. You know, it's not like an email list.
Yeah,
so,
I read his explanation for his justification for doing that, where he considered it, he wasn't building a natural Facebook profile the way most people were. He was using a direct marketer, so he wasn't getting the kind of response and the type of natural interaction that you should get if you're using Facebook as it's intended. So, yeah, it's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, and I just think, you know, some venues are naturally more money-driven and more commercial value than other venues, and I think that Facebook is where people go to goof off, and I think a Google search is where people go when they need something serious, and one does not detract from the other, you know. And I think there's a great place for Facebook advertising too. It's a different set of rules, and you can listen to the conversation we have if you go to Internet Marketing thisweek.com, I think it is. You know, you can listen to that podcast, and I think we had a really trippy conversation, but yeah, I think it's really important not to put the cart before the horse. Your job is to build a list. That is numero uno, and then if you nurture that list, then, you know, email. I think email is the most intimate communication medium there is, other than being alone with somebody in person. I think it's even more intimate than the phone, at least potentially, for some people. Reason why, I've had conversations via email, many conversations via email, that I could have never had in person because they were too emotionally charged. Like, if you needed to talk about like a really painful memory or something like that, even if you were in the comfort and privacy of a therapist's office, a lot of us wouldn't even be able to talk, right? But you can type an email, you know, and there's also a certain amount of control you have of what you say, And so I'm not saying this is for everybody, but for people who like to write, email is like the inner sanctum, and you can really communicate with people very effectively via email. So, yeah, I'm an email guy.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I guess I probably drove that point home a long time ago.
You did. It's interesting because my blog is the second best lead source for my email list. So obviously as a front end mechanism for me, it's been fantastic, and that's only one benefit, of course. So, but that's a different discussion. So, okay, Perry, thanks for taking the time to do this call. Now, this is, I guess, a simple question to ask. Where is the best place? We've mentioned the definitive guide to Google AdWords enough in your 5-day e-course. Is that the best place you direct people to still for getting into Perry's world?
Certainly, yeah. If you want the basic introductory level, go to perrymarshall.com and sign up for the 5-day course, which is you'll see it right there. And if you want to go deeper, what I would suggest is trying the Renaissance Club, and that's a monthly newsletter that gets mailed out via snail mail, actually. And I also believe in print newsletters that you can curl up on the couch and read your newsletter. I think that's a more relaxing place to learn than sitting in front of your computer where there's 9 million distractions. So we do post those online, and subscribers get links to them, and they can comment in a password protected area and all that kind of stuff. But hey, I like good old fashioned snail mail too.
You've been writing those for a long time, haven't you? Because I was a member of that about 3 years ago, I think. So
I've been writing that newsletter for 7 years.
Oh my gosh!
And you know what? Probably the first couple of years of that newsletter was nothing to get really, on fire about. I think they were good newsletters. I don't know that they were fabulous. But, I found a groove. And I just kept writing it, and it got better and better and better. And that's another tip for anybody out there who is some kind of information marketer of any kind, is that, if you just stay in that writing groove and you keep polishing it, it starts to get really good. And people start to like it, and they start to look forward to it. I know it didn't take me very long before, it would get to a certain time of the month, and I go, I think it's time for Dan Kennedy's newsletter to show up. I'm looking forward to it. And sure enough, a day or two later, it would come. And, that predictable, regular dose of information, that's the best way for people to learn anything. It just keeps coming, it keeps coming, it keeps coming, and you add a little bit, you add another layer and another layer, and that's, in my opinion, that's how smart marketers are born.
So smart people are born, I think, in general. So
yeah, smart people, right? You don't learn everything all at once. You learn it in measured doses, whatever, if you're playing the guitar or anything.
Yeah. So. It just shows how important it is to be prolific as a marketer as well. I've been writing my blog 4 years, and it's every single week something has gone out for 4 years straight, regardless of where I was in the world or what I've been doing or how I felt. And obviously, you've been writing a newsletter every month for 7 years. You've been writing your email newsletter for I'm assuming just as long, if not longer.
Yeah.
And you've been writing a lot of content to that. I've got newsletter, blog posts, so anyone who seems to be anybody in this area, especially if it's information based on expertise, is a prolific content producer. It's just like a mandatory requirement. So.
And even really crude things, most people don't know most of Charles Dickens' novels were originally written as monthly installments as magazine articles. Okay? Here's a chapter, and it's in the magazine, and then you get the next chapter next month. And Dickens had his magazine deadline. and he had to submit like 1,500 words, by the end of the month, come heck or high water, he had to do it. And that's how most of Dickens' novels actually got written, is I got to write 1,500 words this month.
Exactly.
So, I mean, dude, there's the formula for being a successful writer. It worked for Dickens,
Yeah.
And there's people say, write every day. Somehow or another, I do write every day.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you want to write, if you want to have an audience, if you want to have a following, then write every day and just go forward and don't look back. The first issue of the Perry Marshall Marketing Letter, I think, went out to 19 people. That's like a pretty small number of people, considering half of them probably didn't even read it.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, I am going to write this newsletter, and this is going to become a great newsletter. So, starts today. And 2 years from now, it'll be 2 years from now whether I wrote every day or not. So I might as well just write every day, and 2 years from now, I will be a great writer. And I don't care what happens with video or streaming this or streaming that or audio or whatever. The internet will always be, the core will be the written word.
Unless people stop reading.
No, they won't.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, it won't happen.
I can't see it.
Unless there's some kind of direct connection to your brain with a socket or something like that. So.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right, good.
This was fun.
Good note to end on, Perry. Thanks for taking the time to do this. And I don't need to say this, but good luck with the continued growth of your business. I'm sure.
Okay, well, good luck to you. Again, I enjoy your blog, and the conspiracy of common sense will hopefully prevail. So good to talk to you.
You too. Thank you.
Have a great one.